This is another in the First Read series in which I read a poem by a poet I don't know at all or know very little about and just do a first reading of their poem without having really paid attention to it before. I pick these kind of randomly. And this is from a journal/press called Sheila Na Gig Incorporated. And this is Rosa Sophia Godshall. I don't like to read anything about people before I do this because I don't want to influence things. So I'm just going to go through and read this. It's a prose poem. I always like to look at the form before I get going, but this one just jumps off the page after Denise Duhamel, great kind of narrative poet. Narrative poetry doesn't tend to be my thing. That's totally fine. I like reading all different types of poetry. I'm assuming since it's after this poet, it'll be a kind of story, but we'll see what happens. Poem in which I learned to forgive. Fairly straightforward title. So I'm just going to read through it. When I do this, I might misread the first time through because I don't know the poet's work. Sometimes that happens when you don't know a poet's work well. Sometimes I read straight, literally what I would read it, the 30th time reading it, but we'll see what happens. My mother digs invasive roots from soil and says, "Don't they look like people?" So already, off the bat, we're into a story-style poem. I like the sound of this. There's a very much an understanding poet behind this. And that might sound weird to say that after just one line, but you get the alliterations happening here. A poet who's very concerned with words. So mother digs invasive roots from soil and says, there's very, like a lot of these kind of sounds. It doesn't beat around the bush, it gets to where we're going. My mother digs invasive roots in soil and says, "Don't they look like people?" Which is interesting. I like gardening stuff, so, this strikes me off the bat, but that was kind of sense in which just kind of humanizing stuff in the soil, and automatically we're thrown into digging stuff, seeing people into it. So, I don't know where we're going to go with this point, but we have a lot of places to go right away from this interesting opening. She grows eggplant, watermelon, squash, tomatoes, peppers. She won't prune palms. This prune and palms are nice kind of sounds here. Their leaves, a canopy over the walkway. I love that interjection there. It might seem like a small thing, but I think it's really well done. She won't prune palms, their leaves, a canopy over the walkway, and a very nice sound. A shield against wind and rain. So there's so much going on right away in the beginning. We have a fairly straightforward story of a mother growing things in the garden. But she won't prune the palm because she wants a canopy, some kind of shield against wind and rain. So it's kind of interesting digging up the past with this, don't they look like people, but also this need for protection right off the bat, which is, like I said, we'll see where we go. There's a lot in this. There's clearly a poet who's aware of, how language can veer off in different directions and bring a lot in. She listens to the silence, and asks, "Where are the birds gone?" When she gets a staph infection from a thorn in her foot, she's in the hospital for a week, where she sits and reads the Atlantic by the window. It's an interesting turn. I didn't expect the staph infection, but it's kind of like following the mother in this, the narrator following the mother. When she comes home, she limps in the garden. It's kind of like a legacy of a trauma where she's in the garden. Her hands want to dig. Her eyes want to feast on sunshine and foliage. Her feet want to feel the earth. This desire to feel these things after this, trauma being in the hospital. She says, "What am I supposed to do?" This is a question, like, what are you supposed to do after the trauma and move forward, like after sickness is, when she wants to do this thing that's become a thing she does, gardening. And I tell her, just sit there and look beautiful. And that's a fairly innocent phrase. It's so loaded for women in history, but a fairly simple phrase, right? I mean, you might say to a mother or child or whatever, and it seems like it's okay. When she says her father always said that, I tell her his spirit walks in the hallway, his blue eyes piercing time, his bald head from the chemo, tobacco pipe from his lips. So it's kind of, the daughter takes this as a good memory here and says, your father, his spirit's there, which, is when you lose a parent, that kind of is there for you. And I think it's bringing this up and showing her father when he was, getting near the end. My mother says she woke with a start. So I didn't know, the time element is here in this is off, which is okay. It doesn't need to be on. But we have some slip in time here. My mother says she woke with a start. Thought she heard his truck in the driveway. So the time is not the tracking element, it's the idea here. So she hears his truck. I'm assuming his truck is the father, the grandfather for the narrator who's no longer around. My first thought, she tells me, he's going to beat me again. And what have I done to deserve it? So this brings in that rather dark note. I feel like we had hints of this in the beginning with the canopy, which seemed to contrast. They just sit there and look beautiful, which, like I said, could be sweet, but also was a bad history for women being told this, right? The father beats her. There's this complicated relationship with parents and grandparents, right? I mean, the mother has a complicated relationship with her father. Even the granddaughter, who might know that, introduces well, yeah, he's right there with you, as if that's a comfort, having that person's spirit there with you. But also the narrator, I just labeled the person a granddaughter, but the narrator who's here, knowing this about a grandfather too, I think impacts you, how you think of them. And what have I done to deserve it? The garden shifts like a dream or a nightmare. This is kind of thing at the right beginning. Like that very first line, my mother digs invasive roots from soil and says, don't they look like these invasive roots, digging them out, don't they look like people? This double sense of the garden as being both a good and potentially a place of, traumatic memories or trauma in themselves. Branches bending, vines stretching, grass is growing. A lot of just nicely put together sound. I mean, sometimes prose poems get, I think, talked down upon because you don't get that kind of sound quality you can sometimes get in a shorter line. But here it's really happening well. I mean, this poet's really controlling this. High until it becomes the garden of her youth, enclosed by wooden fences, fertilized by secrets. This is a different kind of garden, right? The mother is shifting into this garden that's fenced and fertilized by secrets, and it's not necessarily a nice place. I've learned to let go, says the narrator, when my mother drinks too much and hurts me. This is an element I didn't see coming, but it kind of fits. It's this kind of way in which the garden that the mother is in has all these invasive things. I'm like, all right, it can be traumatic and good, and the mother can get stuck in it in memory. But she's also hurt the daughter, so the daughter can see it both ways as well. This kind of garden image. I remember how I found her old bow in my grandmother's garden. She switched to grandmother at this point, buried in the soul, which I think is interesting. It's not the mother switching to the grandmother's garden, which shows us again these cycles of traumatic things that might happen in a family and stay there. My father taught me to shoot, my mother says, lifting her toned arm, right arm straight, left arm bent, aiming at the passive edge to end its darkness. Because the mother, is looking to shoot the bow and somehow escape from the darkness. And the daughter is actually learning to let go of it. So the daughter is actually doing that. That same thing with words, not getting stuck in it as much as letting it go through the words itself. With the garden, it seems like for the mother has been symbolic garden, partially for the narrator as well. Poem in which I learned to forgive. Really, I mean, this is a great poem. I don't, run into things I'm like, wow, just really good. Like, not like I don't read great poems all the time, but just something new that's striking by a poet I haven't heard of. Rosa Sophia Godshall. This is great. I want to read some more of this poet's writing for sure. It's not in my typical wheelhouse for what I would want to read, but I'm kind of fascinated by the way this poet is really playing with language in a really understanding and like clever way. So, great poem. And like I said, Sheila and I gig incorporated.